Hi, I'm going to be showing you how to install and use unload for frame counting speedruns without load times automatically. So first of all, we're going to go to the unload GitHub page. This page also contains a written guide if you would rather use that instead of watching this video. At the top of this page, if we scroll down a little bit, we will see a download button. We're going to go there. And we're going to click where it says download the most recent release here. And we scroll down a little bit to the assets and we see unload and then the version number .zip. Just get the most recent version and download that. As soon as that's done, we're going to unzip this by opening it with an unzipping program. I'm going to open it with the default Windows unzipping one, as that is just easiest for me now. And we're gonna go and cut and paste this somewhere where you're not gonna lose it. In my case, I'll place it on the desktop for this example. That's gonna take a second to go and extract it. Perfect. Now we navigate into this folder and we open unload.exe. It might give you a warning. You're just going to have to trust me that the program is safe and hit more info than hit run anyway. Now we have unload open. Up in the top left, we can hit convert and load. This is going to open a file explorer window and we're going to select the video that we're going to want to frame count. Click it and hit open. This will show this window. This window is for adjusting the video settings. So what's going to happen after we hit convert here is it's going to take our video file and convert it all to images so that the program can do its magic and compare if an image should be a load frame or not. Anyway, to optimize that conversion process a little bit, we can tweak some settings here. So for example, I know that there's about 4 seconds of nothingness at the end of my video. So I set the end time to 12:28 instead. That's good if the runner whose VOD you used leaves some dead space either before or after the run. It's also possible that they record the video at a higher frame rate than the game runs, meaning that the conversion process will take longer because there's more frames to convert. So you can lower the FPS in that case, but be sure not to lower it below the game's frame rate because that will cause inaccuracies. Okay, I'm happy with these settings, so I'm going to hit convert. And it's going to convert our video to images, which might take a little while depending on the speed of your computer and the length of the video. So I'll cut back to when this is done. Great. Now that our conversion is done, I'm going to go over how the interface works a little bit. Up in the top left, we have the pick load panel. This panel is going to be used for selecting a load frame that to compare to so that we can find it and detect every load frame. This frame count panel is for selecting on what frame the run starts, on which frame it ends, and eventually calculating the final time. This load detection panel in the top right is going to be used for actually detecting every loading frame once we have selected one. This detected load panel will eventually give us an overview of every load frame that's detected, and setting speaks for itself. We have the concurrent task setting here, which is going to be how many tasks unload can spin up at the same time. You can raise this if you want a bit faster performance, but be careful that you only do that when you're on very good hardware, because if you are on worse hardware, raising it might have the opposite effect. Okay, so with that out of the way, almost forgot to mention, in the center here, we have the video and video controls and a timeline. We can slide this along to see the individual video frames, and we can use these buttons in the top left to either advance one frame at a time or advance 15 frames at a time, or it depends on your video frame rate actually, 1/4 of a second every time you click these double arrows. All right, What you're seeing here is my personal speed game and the world record of it, currently held by Shockster on the PC version. So this speed game has, it's The Hobbit, and it has very clear loading screens that look like this. Like this, making it a perfect candidate for unload because they are always very clearly distinct. Okay, so first, before we get started on picking the loads, let's choose where the run starts and ends. So I'm going to navigate on the timeline here. And this is going to depend on the rules of your community. Our run starts the moment that this title screen, we see the new game and everything disappear. So that would be this exact frame. So with that in mind, I'm going to hit set start here. And you'll see on the left, it has updated the start frame to this frame. Perfect. Next, I'm going to move the timeline slider to the end of the run. And again, this will depend on your community rules, but we end our timing as soon as our character here interacts with this blue barrel. So over here, we've interacted, so we're going to go one frame earlier, and I'm going to mark this as the end of the run because this is the last frame of gameplay, and that's how we time stuff in our community. And we see the end frame has also updated. Now, we're going to move our timeline to a loading frame. This is going to be completely dependent on your game as well. And here I have a loading frame. So, with the loading frame on our preview, we can go to pick load here. Pick load is going to allow us to hit this plus button here, and we'll see the current screenshot or the current video. We will see a screen of that in the top left, and this will be what the program is going to be looking for as a loading frame. However, our game doesn't all have this exact loading frame. For example, here's the loading frame for the second level. And we'll see it's a bit different, but they have something in common, and that is this loading text in the bottom right is always visible on either of the loading screen. So that's the kind of distinct thing that we're going to be looking for. This is perfect because we will only need to look for the loading text, and we can identify every single loading frame in this game, regardless of if it has multiple different images in other places. So what we do is we want to crop our loading frame to that loading part, so we look for just that. And by doing that, we use these sliders. So I'm going to crop some off the left here. I'm going to crop some of the top. I'm going to crop some of the right. And I'm going to crop some of the bottom. And I'm just going to crop a little more off the right. Now we found this loading text. And to confirm whether or not it's going to match our loading screen, we can hit this button, check similarity to video frame here, which is going to select if this, or is going to show how similar this part of the loading screen is to the current frame we're previewing. So if we hit check similarity now, we'll see it's very high because we picked from this loading frame, or because it's almost the exact same and we're on a loading frame. Now if we go into actual gameplay and we hit it again, we'll see, oh, it's down to 0.4. So basically this is a range between 0 and 1, and the higher it is, the closer it is to a loading frame. And you might want to test to see, so now it's 0.37, so it's low. You might want to test your video to see if it adds up, so 0.99, extremely high. Perfect, so now we've picked our one loading screen. But what we can also do is if we have a different game, so I'm just going to keep using this video as an example. Let's say we have a different game where we don't have one visually distinct element like the loading text here, but we have a set of loading screens that are all with different images. but maybe it's like 3 or 4 images that it chooses at random in the loading screen. I'm just throwing something out there. Then what we can do is we can look for that. So let's imagine this image in the middle will keep showing up, which it actually does. It just happens to be the case for the Hobbit that we can use a easier reference. What we can do is we can adjust our loading frame crop. And I'm just going to crop a bit of the image. Probably don't need all of it because it'll be recognizable either way. Crop a bit off the bottom. And we'll see, this is the loading frame from Dreamworld. If we compare this now, it's not going to be similar at all. But if we go back to the load frame where this is picked from, we'll see it's very similar. Now, it will be able to detect this loading frame because it's similar to that, but not other ones. So what we do in that case is we find one of those other loading screens, and now we can just hit the plus button in the pick load area again, and it's going to add this as a load frame, which if we check now, it is the exact same because it's the exact same frame we picked from. If we go a couple frames further, we'll see it's still very, very similar. And we can go ahead and do this for every type of loading screen you might have. So it really depends on your speed game, whether or not you're going to have to pick multiple loads, or if you can find one element that they have in common. Anyway, you can navigate to see the loading screens you've picked with these arrows, and you can remove and add more by using the plus and minus. A quick note is that the cropping for every loading screen will be the same. So if I adjust some to the right here, and I check the other one, this one's also going to be adjusted to the right. That is mainly a hardware limitation. If you were allowed to pick multiple different croppings, then because of the way the program works, it would take significantly longer to detect the load frames. Anyway, so that's how you would go about selecting multiple load frames. That was quite the explanation. But for this example, I'm going to go back and I'm just going to select a single load frame because that's what works best for this game. So I'm just going to go and reset this cropping and do it again, picking the loading text. And another quick note is the smaller you can crop something here, the better. Because a smaller thing will be easier to detect than a big thing. And that's just going to speed stuff up. Okay. Once again, check the similarity. Yep. So keeping in mind the similarity number, we see that when we do hit a load screen, it's pretty much in the 0.99 range, which is very good. So next, we're going to go up to the top right of our video, where we see the load detection. And we'll see a minimum similarity area. Now, as we saw in our load frames, most of the load frames seem to have a similarity of 0.99. So you basically want to choose a value here that is below the load frames value, but higher than any of the gameplay value. So 0.98 is just a very good number, which you probably won't have to mess with. Okay, knowing that, we're going to hit prepare frames. It's going to give us a little pop-up message that this will take a while, so be sure to have set all your settings so far correctly. I'm going to hit yes. I have a pretty fast computer and I have a small loading frame crop here, so for me, it's not going to take that long. Now what it's doing is it's actually cropping every frame of the entire video to the same cropping of your loading frame and applying what's called a p-hash on it, which is going to allow it to check how much the load frame looks like the current frame in the video. So if that's done, we can still tweak the similarity, but what we want to do is we can hit detect load frames, and that's just gonna, boom, find all our loading frames for us. And in the bottom left, it's going to show us our time without loads and our time with loads instantly. Now, if we select some of these loads in this list, we'll see, yep, Yep, these are all loading screens. It has detected them all, what seems to be perfectly. Now, if we drag our timeline around, it'll also snap to the start and end of loading screens. So you'll see. This is the start of one loading screen. This is the end of the flies and spiders loading screen. These are very quick loads in this game. And if I go one frame back, we'll see, okay, that wasn't a loading screen there. If I go to the end and I go one frame forward, the loading screen ended. So that's all accurate and nice. If you want to stop it from snapping to the detected loads, you can hit this button in the bottom right here. And you can move the timeline around freely again. But for now, I'm happy with this. So it seems like our loads have been detected successfully, but let's say they weren't. Let's say our similarity was too high and it didn't pick up every single one of them. Well, what we could do is we could lower our similarity, which in this case is actually not going to give us the results we want, but I'll show it as an example. So I'm lowering the similarity to 0.9, and I'm going to hit detect loads again. And we'll see it suddenly picked up a lot more things as loads, but this isn't a loading frame. These aren't loading frames. That's because if we check the similarity, these parts are visually very similar, but not similar enough. So you're going to have to be careful with what similarity you use. Generally, 0.98 seems to be a very good sweet spot for everything I've tried though. Okay, so we have our load frames. We see our time without loads. You can copy it from this box if you so desire. And let's check it. So we have 12, 19, 4, 3, 3. Let's compare this. 12, 19, 4, 3, 3. It has managed to find every load in this world record successfully. What we can also do is we can now, in the bottom right, hit export load times. And I'll just call this Shockster World Record. And if we pull this up now, what it has created is a .csv file, which can be opened in either Excel or OpenOffice or just with a text editor. And what this contains, okay, is a little sheet with the first, last, and total frames of every load frame, every loading screen, and the time without loads and the time with loads. So you can use this to keep a log of what you've verified and what you, so you can check it back later. Perfect. So that about covers what you can do with unload. A quick footnote is, let's say I've closed this by accident, my computer's crashed or whatever. Know that you are not going to have to convert the video again if you've done it once already. So if I start unload back up, we can now hit load instead of convert and load. And if we check in this folder here, we see it's created a _frames folder for our video that we were testing earlier. Now we can just select this video file and it'll open it up because we've already done the conversion process. So that's that. If anything is unclear, feel free to ask me about it. Make sure that if you want additional information or if this video becomes out of date, you check the GitHub page and there is a usage tab which goes over how to use it, as well as a extra info, which gives you a little more information. Anyway, that's that. I hope unload works well for you.